Thank you everyone for joining us tonight to discuss the plan amendment case for 1804 Ulit Avenue. If you're joining us on your computer, you'll notice a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen titled Q&A. This is how you interact with tonight's presenters. Feel free to submit your name and feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation using this Q&A box. And also for those of you joining us online, if you would like to follow along using closed captions, you're able to do so. Look to the lower right of your screen to find a small gear icon. Click on that and then on captions and settings, and you should be able to choose from a drop-down list of about 5 languages, available languages. And before getting started on tonight's presentations, let's meet our staff and presenters. I'm Jesse Gutierrez with Planning and Zoning.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Engstrom with the Planning and Zoning Department. This is Mark Walters is muted.
I'm Mark Walters, Planning and Zoning, and I'll be moderating questions.
Hi, I'm Rachel Tepper with Planning and Zoning, and I've been helping out with tech support for this meeting.
Hi, I'm Maureen Meredith. I'm the Plan Amendment Case Manager. I'll be doing the staff presentation, and I will also be the contact person for any questions or comments after the meeting has ended.
Hi, I'm Amanda Swore with Drenner Group, and we are here representing the applicants for the neighborhood plan amendment request.
Hi, I'm Amy Arfman with Drenner Group and working with Amanda as well on the presentation.
So, welcome to this virtual plan amendment meeting to discuss plan amendment NPA 2020-003.01 in the Chestnut neighborhood planning area. Again, my name is Maureen Meredith. I'm the plan amendment case manager. Heather Chafin is the zoning case manager for this case, and here's her contact information. Next slide. So the agenda tonight is I'll go over a little bit more information about the case. I will go over some meeting ground rules, how to participate in the process, why there is a plan amendment application, what is a future land use map. Then we will go into the applicant's presentation, and then we will open the session for questions and answers. So as I said before, this is within the Chestnut neighborhood planning area. The property address is 1804 Ulit Avenue. It's 0.13 acres. Again, there's the case number, NPA 2020-0003.01. The request is to change the future land use map from civic to office. The associated zoning case number is C14 2020-0074. The request is to change the zoning from P District Neighborhood Plan to Neighborhood Office Conditional Overlay Neighborhood Plan for administrative and business offices. Here's the property owner for Caddy. Stephen DeMarco is one of the owners, and the agent is Amanda Swore from Drenner Group. Some of the ground rules, as you know, there are 2 property owners. Okay, they should be able to introduce themselves at the during the Q&A. Some ground rules, as you know, due to need for social distancing, in-person questions and comments have been moved to online chat via this live event. If you are participating online, you will not be able to speak during this meeting, but you can ask questions and make comments using the chat function. Telephone participants will be able to speak during a Q&A session of the meeting. Any threats, personal attacks, profanity, racial epithets, or slurs used on this virtual chat will not be published, and staff reserves the right to remove offenders from the meeting. We have not had any need to do this at this point for any of the meetings we've had. The questions will be answered in the order they are received, and similar questions may be grouped and answered together. Next slide. So how to participate in this process. All questions will be answered and made available by request within 5 business days on the website. You can email or call the case manager, either me or Heather Chafin, with any questions and comments that you have. Written comments will be added to staff case reports that go before Planning Commission and City Council. If you live within 500 feet, you will get a notice in the mail of the date and time of the Planning Commission hearing. It will be virtual, and there will be instructions on how to participate in those virtual public hearings. Next slide. So why is there a neighborhood plan amendment? So neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. The city charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Most NPAs are amendments to the plan's future land use map, and most NPAs have an associated zoning change application. So this map shows in blue areas of the city that have City Council approved neighborhood plans, most of which have future land use maps. Next slide. So this is what a future land use map looks like, and these colors represent broad land uses. For example, the yellow represents single family, pink office, brown mixed use, orange multifamily, etc. So for this application, it is currently, you can see the arrow pointing to the property. It is currently a light blue. That is the civic land use. And with the proposed zoning of neighborhood office, the proposed land use is office, and it would represent through the pink color, as you see. And the next chart shows the zoning districts that are associated with the various land use categories. Next slide. We have an aerial photo that shows the property location on Ulit Avenue. Next slide is just a Google picture of the property. Next slide is a future land use map, again, that shows the property with the land use of civic. The next map shows the zoning on the property as P public, which is usually designated for churches, schools, etc. The next map shows the property in relation to the Imagine Austin activity corridors and centers. And so next we will go into Amanda Swar's presentation.
Thank you, Maureen. Again, my name's Amanda Swar with Drenner Group. I will be able to go through the beginning part of my presentation pretty quickly, given that Maureen oriented and ran through the high points. But again, my name's Amanda Swar with Drenner Group, and we also have Jason McKinney and Stephen DeMarco, 2 of the property owners, with us that will be able to answer any questions if there are any. Next slide, please. Again, this was just an orientation of where the property is. It's at 1804 Ulit, located just south of MLK Boulevard. Next slide, please. As Maureen said, this is a 0.13 acre site, again, located about 260 feet south of MLK, that's zoned public today and has a civic use on the future land use map. The structure is about a 2,600 square foot church that hasn't been used as a church since 2014. However, at the time of the adoption of the neighborhood plan and the zoning, it was a church, and therefore it has the existing civic zoning and future land use map designation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Kind of skipping through, Maureen showed most of these already. Next slide, please. And so as Maureen said, this is designated as civic on the future land use map. This does show where it is also zoned P public. Next slide, please. And as staff indicated, our request is to amend both the zoning category and the future land use map to allow for a continued adaptive reuse of the building and rezone the property to a neighborhood office with a conditional overlay that I'll talk more about in a minute, and continue to utilize the neighborhood plan overlay, and then additionally amend the future land use map from civic to office. Next slide, please. Before we turned in the application to request to both rezone the property and amend the future land use map, we reached out to and met with the neighborhood plan contact team just to make sure that we weren't way off base. We understand that making a change from a civic designation to an office or any other designation is something that is not characteristically done. This property is a little bit different than most in that, as everyone knows, it was built as a church and was utilized for a church for many years. But in 2014, the property owner at that time made permits to the city and made some conversions to the interior of the church, which I'll show you, to make it an office building. After the use of the church in 2014, the property has been run as an office for the last several years. It wasn't until recently that the owners were made aware that that use, the office use, was actually not a permitted use on the property, and that that was one of the spurs for the request to change both the zoning and the future land use map. And I'd be happy to go into more detail on how all of that happened and why we are where we are, if there's any desire for that background. But with our reach out to the neighborhood plan contact team, we wanted them to understand that this was a request truly to allow for the adaptive reuse of the building. This wasn't a request to allow the structure to be demolished and for someone to come in and build a new office here. We wanted to be able to continue to operate a business use in this structure and do so without it being operated in a P zoning and make it a legal use. And so with that, in our work with the neighborhood plan contact team over several months, we were asked if we would put some conditions on the property in order to obtain the contact team's support. And we wholeheartedly agreed to do that. Therefore, the conditional overlays that we requested as part of the rezoning included a limitation on vehicle trips per day, which will turn to uses on the site. It also put into place limitations on the size of the building, which match what is there today. So it has a height limitation of 2 stories or 35 feet, a maximum building coverage of 50%, which is existing condition, as well as a floor to area ratio limitation of 0.5 to 1, again, which is consistent with the building that's on the ground today. With the change to the neighborhood office zoning category, there were some uses that the neighborhood plan contact team desired to be listed as prohibited uses on the property, and the applicant was amenable to that and included that in the request, and those are the uses that are listed on the screen. Next slide, please. This is a copy of the letter that we received from the neighborhood plan contact team, again, issuing a letter of support for this request so long as these items were included in the conditional overlay. Next slide, please. This is a picture just down a little bit from what Maureen showed. But what I want to show in this instance is that this is what the church looks like recently, where you can see that it has been taken care of, where when the end of the church regime, the building was starting to fall into disrepair, and the owners have really restored the outside and the inside while still maintaining the building that adds character to the area. So next slide, please, and I'll show you a couple of the interior pictures. So you can see that the outside has been preserved and the inside has been really restored as well and turned into an office use. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. I will just end with one more question that I have received from a couple of individuals that have called, and that is really related to how parking is handled with the existing office or would be handled for a future office. And there is existing parking in the alley. There are 5 parking spaces behind the structure, as well as the 2 on-street parking spaces that are right in front of this building. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions that there might be, and thank you for attending the meeting this evening.
Well, this is Mark Walters, Planning and Zoning. I have my mic turned on now, so if there are any questions out there, please free to enter them into the chat. See that we have 3 attendees, I think 2 of which are the property owners. If the third person would like to ask a question, feel free at this time. And if we don't receive any questions within the next 30 odd 40, 50 seconds, because there's a delay from when we speak to when you hear it, we'll just conclude the meeting and wish everyone a good evening and get back to fixing dinner, I guess. Well, Maureen, while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, could you please let people know what the next steps might be?
Sure. So what will happen after this meeting, long-range planning staff will meet and make a recommendation. It will then go to the zoning planners to make a recommendation. And then we will start scheduling the cases for Planning Commission and City Council. For people who live within 500 feet, you will receive that public hearing notice in the mail with instructions on how to participate in the virtual meeting. You do have to sign up to speak. You will get that information in the public hearing notice. Again, if you have any questions after this meeting, my contact information was on the community meeting notice you received in the mail, and don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Well, we did get a comment from the third person, from Bridget Ground. It says, no questions, though she says she's assured to hear the neighbor contact team's requests are being met. So if no questions, we can call this a meeting and wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Take care.